I talk a lot about change, so this might seem a little contradictory, but you do not have to change in any way. You don't have to go out and make big changes in the world either. But if you're watching this, you're probably an ambitious professional who cares about growing as a person and helping others in some way. And that is why this message is particularly important for you. First, personal change ideally shouldn't come from a sense of obligation, because that's probably not going to be motivating enough to stick, nor is it going to be particularly fulfilling. In fact, the most effective personal change comes from an acceptance of where you are now so that you can move forward in an aligned way. This applies to any personal change, but let's take a health example. And you want to get healthier and fitter. You start off with accepting your body and your habits where you are now, developing a healthy relationship with your body, and so that if you do want to make changes to your fitness, your eating, your habits, you're doing it from a place of nurturing and looking after yourself rather than from a place of dissatisfaction, punishment, or hatred. You want to work with yourself, not against it. This makes the journey so much more pleasant, and you're more likely to stick with the healthy, supportive habits because you're looking after yourself rather than thrashing yourself or chasing trends and quick fixes that just don't work or last. And if you're on the treadmill of seeking constant personal development and positive change and healing and growth, there is so much value in all of those spaces. But if you're continuously engaged in those, I'd invite you to pause for a moment, because this intense focus can be another coping mechanism to distract you from where you really are. It keeps your focus maybe constantly on the future or going over and over the past rather than just noticing where you are now. It can also be another form of perfectionism, trying to endlessly perfect yourself. Again, a subconscious mechanism, there's no judgment around that. Or it can also be used, this engagement in personal development, consumption of books, podcasts, etc., can be a way to actually avoid applying the lessons and integrating, because integration is the most important part of any kind of personal change. And for some, and for you at times, maybe it's just not time for a focus on personal change. Maybe you have so many other life changes going on. And when I say personal change, I mean maybe inner change. Because if you're moving house, moving jobs, buying a puppy, your capacity to integrate further change is going to be super limited. So it's okay to just wait. You don't have to be constantly engaged in personal betterment, because you can also just be here where you are now. Sometimes it's so much healthier to just take the foot off the pedal, pause, and focus on acceptance and connection to the present moment, rather than constantly pursuing inner change. Going deep into your roots rather than trying to keep running forward fast. That groundedness and that depth has so much value as well. And remember, the point of personal development is to grow as a person, but this includes expanding your capacity to feel fulfilled and joyful, not just chasing the next change. You want to be able to enjoy your life and what you're creating and expand your capacity to enjoy it along the way. So we want to make sure that this pursuit of personal development doesn't turn into another form of perfectionism rather than a useful tool for growth. And it's very possible and actually quite common to become addicted to learning about self-help and personal development instead of actually applying it, because you're running towards a change instead of sitting with yourself and constantly striving out there instead of cultivating a healthy foundation of acceptance. And where you are in all of this and your interaction with personal change and inner growth and personal development, that's for you to understand for yourself. And even just sitting and understanding that for yourself might be in change enough. There's no judgment, there's no shame, it's just an understanding, and to make sure that you're doing what's in alignment for you. And the second part about why you might not want to change, or the case against change, and this might be controversial or even hard for you to hear, but it's also what makes this really important, is that you're not obliged to go out and make big change in the world. I know, just hear me out. You can, you have the talents to, but you don't have to. We all have a role in contributing, but this is another lens, including timing and capacity. It's also about self-awareness about your own drivers and motivations. Are you coming from a place that maybe you learned as a child of feeling overly responsible, of feeling like your value stems from how you help others, how much you're able to help others, and taking on big burdens and responsibilities? And this links back to our social conditioning, based in the context of your family system and your social system. For example, as a massive generalization, please, many people who are raised as women are likely to have been conditioned to be helpers and caretakers. And many men were conditioned to believe that their value aligns with their financial stability. So does your familial or social conditioning affect your desires to create positive change or how you're showing up in the world? And it's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just about awareness. It's absolutely not to say that you shouldn't be contributing in the ways that you are, or the ways that you want to. It's just understanding where you're coming from. And it's not saying that some motivations are better than others. It's just worth understanding yourself, because it enables you to create more inner balance in terms of how much you take on, and to ensure that you're not going to be susceptible to burnout. And because we need what you're contributing to, and I think we need to think about the long-term sustainability of what we're contributing, and not contributing because we feel like we have to and our entire worth stems from it, but from really a sense of feeling resourced and able to contribute. And I believe that we're all able to make positive contributions to the world, and that looks different for everybody. But it's important to make sure that you're not forcing yourself to, or shouldering too much, or attaching your worth to it, because it can lead to burnout, and it can lead to a sense of resentment and isolation. And you could end up feeling like, say, you're carrying the weight of fixing the climate crisis on your shoulders. We all have a role, but it's worth understanding if you're playing out old patterns and traumas that connect your worth to how much responsibility you carry. And if that is driving your desire to create a change, it's important to find a healthy balance for yourself. And I believe we also have an obligation to reflect upon our own capacities. How resourced are you? And I mean that in terms of not just finances, say, if you want to be volunteering, we all need to also pay our bills, but I mean in terms of time, energy, as well as finances, mental, emotional, and physical capacity, etc. And this constantly changes. And I think that this is very hard, especially for really ambitious, driven people who want to help, to hear, is that sometimes we also need to balance this giving with receiving. And our capacity to give changes constantly, and it changes through different seasons of life. It changes depending on your personal circumstances, your mental and physical health, the support system and the community you have around you, and the political, social, and cultural influences that you exist within that context. Sometimes you can help, and sometimes you might be in a place where you actually need to receive other people's support, or at least slow down for a while. And that's okay too. We usually have the capacity to give and receive simultaneously, and it's just that the balance will shift. And this is also why it's so important that we create systems and structures that support our general well-being, so that we are able to be well-resourced, all of us, and then we all have greater capacity to help, and everyone has more to give. Now, I recognize the elements of privilege in here. I'm talking about people who are maybe working in the spaces of caring or giving or making change through their work. Obviously, there are so many crises that are happening around the world, and many of us want to be able to contribute as much as we can. And I think that that's really important too. And obviously, people who are existing within those crises do not have the privilege to pause at all. And I want to acknowledge that as well. But where we are able to reflect on our long-term contributions and our ability to keep contributing, I think that that's really important as well. And it's also important that we're not burning out so much that, say, we're not in a crisis zone, but we might need to make sure that we're so well resourced so that when that crisis, say, that we can't access is over, we have the resources, the time, the energy, the skills to really support people getting back on their feet as well. But I just want to mention that element too, because I want to make sure there's no confusion. So yes, I encourage both personal transformation, very important, and contributing to broader positive change in ways that light you up and feel meaningful to you and work with your skills and passions. And I think it's really important to consider that there is a time and a place, and people like you who are driven to contribute to positive change need to keep an extra eye on pushing yourselves too far. Because in order to support both personal and systems change in healthy and sustainable ways that lead to long-term transformation, it's really important to reflect on your inner state, your social conditioning, and the broader context. If you have any questions or comments on this, I'd love to hear from you. Keep doing the great work, and thank you for tuning in.